Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Hafiz bin Muin, and today I will present about my research, which is the comparison between gender on motivation in sport participation among UATM students. Okay, now we go to the background of the study. Okay, the first one is the motivations are factors that stimulate the behavior of a person, lead them in a certain direction, and bring about coordination because of them, by Jamawadi, Ibrahimi, and Dana in 2020. So the individuals are not only different in terms of the ability to do a certain job, but in terms of the will to do that job or the motivations that drives them, by Mawadi in 2020. So next, the motivation is an important psychological variable in the physical activity, as it determines both entry and continued adherence to the physical activity. So it is important to understand the motivation behind the behavior in sport participation motivation, what the catalyst is, and what modifies the behavior, by Mawadi in 2020. Okay, we go to the next slide is the statement of the problem. So firstly, the lack of sport participation of physical activity is a significant health problem for students, although there are many clear benefits of an active lifestyle, by Kilpatrick in 2018. So next, the athletic motivation of university students must be examined in order to create better programs and strategies to enhance their levels of physical activity, by David Nietes in 2015. So the key issue in research for physical activity is developing an understanding of motivation. In this study, there are two main research objectives, which is to determine the factor of motivation in physical activity participation among students, and the second to compare the differences between gender on motivation of physical activity participation among students. So we will move to the next slide is literature review. So the first is the motivational gender differences in sport and exercise participation among university sport science students. So the participation in physical activity among university students has often been overlooked because so much attention has centered on the negative image of university students who spend their leisure time such as watching television or socializing, by Lapkin in 1998. So a research found that men learn more closely to intrinsic motivation than women. So the four most important motivations for both male and female were affiliation, fitness, skill development, and friendship, as opposed to the three least influential motivators, which were reward or status, situational, and competition, by K.G. Tonga in 2011. So next, for the second literature review is participation, motivation, and student physical activity among sport students in 3 countries. So the motivation is a complex phenomenon that is impossible to simply subsume under a single model. So next, in this second literature review, the experience of sport appears to be attractive to the student for the following types of reasons, such as fun, enjoyment, improving skills, learning, being with friends, success, winning, and hate, by Walden and Deezer in 2010. So in attempt to solve one of the problems of assessing achievement motivation, sports psychologists develop specific assessment instruments adapted to sport activity and different sports situation. Okay, the next slide is methodology. So for research design, I chose the quantitative design. So this research study involves a process of analysis and data collection using random surveys. So this study will use a non-experimental survey causal cooperative to determine the comparison between gender on motivation in sports participation among UiTM students. Okay, so for the sampling, the estimate sample to be taken in this research is 450 respondents. So 20% sample will have added and total sample will be taken in 540 students. So the questionnaire in the Google form will be distributed by using social media to the respondent. So for inclusion criteria, the student which age more than 18 years old in UiTM Serban 3, while for exclusion criteria which is below than 18 years old and not from UiTM Serban 3 student. So next is instrumentation. So the instrumentation use bilingual language that the researcher originally wrote in the English language and was translated by a person who influenced both English and Bahasa Malaysia using this analysis. So the questionnaires were divided into two sections, which is section A and section B. In section A, consists of question designed by the researcher to assess the background of the respondent in this study. So this section has 5 items in total. So in section B, consisted of questions associated with full range motivation of sport participation between gender. So this section has 30 items that have been divided into 6 motivational factors. So Likert scales are used in section B, which will be answered by the respondent. So a 5-point Likert scale was used indicating their preferences from 1 not at all important to 5 extremely important. So the next slide, we can see the section A. So the respondents are needed to answer questionnaire 5 items, which is gender, age, foundation, faculty, and course programs. Meanwhile, for the section B, we can see the respondent needed to answer a total of 30 question items from the participation motivation questionnaires, PMQ. So the PMQ tests 6 factors the motivation of sport participation, which is achievement, teamwork, skill development, fitness, energy release, and friendship and fun. So all those factors have 5 question items each. So we go to the next slide is the data collection procedure. So firstly, get ethics approval from Faculty of Sports Science and Recreation, FSR, to carry out this study. So second, they run the pilot study to find out the validity of the questionnaire. And then, the researcher get the permission from the supervisor to run the study. After that, distribute the questionnaire to the respondent through online using Google Form linked to email. And then lastly, collect the data to analyze when the respondent are finished to answer the questionnaire. Okay, this is the Combust Alpha for the pilot study analysis. So the reliability statistics were already made to obtain Combust Alpha by all items, which is 0.95. Since the overall value of Combust Alpha is 0.95, it can be concluded that the questionnaire is reliable and can be used for the study. Okay, next the data analysis for the research objective number 1, which is to determine the factor of motivation in physical activity participation among students. It will use the descriptive analysis. Meanwhile, for the second research objective, which is to compare the differences between gender on motivation of physical activity participation among students, it will use the independent t-test analysis. Okay, the next slide is the result for research finding about the research objective number 1. So the highest mean on the factor of motivation in physical activity participation among UiTM Seremban 3 student is fitness, which is 4.3. So for the second highest mean is skill development, which has a mean of 4.2, followed by teamwork, which has a mean of 4.13, friendship and fun, which has a mean of 4.04, and energy release, which has a mean of 3.78. Meanwhile, the lowest mean on the factor of motivation in physical activity participation among UiTM Seremban 3 student is an achievement, which is 3.39. Okay, the result for research finding about the second research objective, the independent t-test showed that the mean component scores for female students were higher than female students for all 6 motivational factors. So for achievement, the results show that the mean for males is 3.55 and for females 3.23, which is the lowest respondent for males and female students. So the highest mean of motivation factor is fitness, which is for male student 4.4 and for female student 4.2. Then the second highest mean of motivation factor is also skill development, which is for female student 4.25 and for female student 4.15, followed by teamwork, which is males 4.23, for females 4.04. For the energy release, which has a mean for males 3.89, for females 3.66, and lastly for friendship and fun, which has a mean for male student 4.17 and for female student 3.91. So we move to the discussion. For research objective 1 is to determine the factor of motivation in physical activity participation among UiTM Seremban 3 students. So the highest mean on the factor of motivation in physical activity participation is the fitness factor, which is mean 4.3. So this is similar to the previous studies on motivation to participate in sport. It has been determined that the factors such as skill development, physical fitness, friendship and achievement are the most important factors affecting participation in sports. By Gill 1983, White and Duder 1994, and Cole 1999. So therefore, motivational factors can affect UiTM Seremban 3 student to participate in sport participation. Meanwhile, for research objective 2 is to compare the differences between gender on motivation of physical activity participation among UiTM Seremban 3. So the results show a significant difference between gender on motivation of physical activity participation among UiTM students. So accordingly, the male students achieve higher mean scores of motivation for sports participation comparing with female students. So there were significant differences in the subscale of skill improvement, achievement, entertainment and activity, which found that the most important reasons motivating male and female students to participate in sports were improving skills, being healthy physical, and learning new skills. So the result of the study show similarities with this study by Oyer 2001. So, in conclusion, the first objective results found that the motivational factors that will be able to influence students to participate in any sports participation. Meanwhile, the second objective results found that there was a significant difference between gender on motivation of physical activity participation among UiTM Seremban 3 students. So this indicates that the male students have greater sports participation compared to the female students. Therefore, motivation is very important to attract and influence students to engage in this sports participation. So this suggestion is recommended that a study be conducted to increase the sports motivation of students who follow sports training. Besides that, the suggestion can recommend that emotional factors should be taken into consideration in the motivation of students who want to participate in sport participation and who receive sports training. In addition, the educational institution in the field of sport are recommended to provide professional psychological support to encourage students to participate in sports. This will be an important step for the increase of physical activity in the target group and thus a relevant contribution to their current and future aid. As well as this will also be able to increase sports participation among students. So they are motivated accordingly because that both male and female students want to get pleasure from the sport they do and success in their sports. So that's all for me. Thank you for your time to watching my video. Assalamualaikum.